Okay, hi, this is Jeff at DJM Suspension, and we're working on Ford coils today. We got a lot of calls in our mail about, and that's tech at djmsuspension.com, about Ford coils and them not aligning, just putting them on. So our task was to go get a couple of coils and go and see what's going on with everybody purchasing new coils for these trucks. It usually will work with your standard coil that you have in the truck, as long as you're near zero or no more than +5 degrees positive on your alignment. So because you're a little positive, you're going to have people sitting in the truck, so you're going to be right around zero when you're driving it around. But still, we have a lot of people, a lot of incorrect purchases on springs. So what we did is we took a couple of popular springs, just went on Amazon, ordered Moog spring CC808 and another Moog spring 8228. So we know from experience that you have different engines in your Ford trucks, you have these different things, and we know that one spring isn't going to fit all. But it looks like that's all we have available to us. There's guys selling springs on there, almost count on them not aligning, and or not being close enough on alignment that you can even get by. So so we're going to go on, and we have the specs on the springs that were original to my truck, and we're going to go out and take a look at my truck, and we're going to go ahead and install these springs. And this is what the spring looks like. It's just a standard old pigtail spring. And then they have what they call their progressive, which is the 8228. And that spring I like better. We'll show you some things around. And of course, we had to modify the spring to get it in alignment. Whether you're going to be able to buy a set of these, pop them in, and it's going to align for you, I would say you don't have a big chance on that. Be ready to fool around with the alignment. You're probably going to have to do it. And they make other people make springs. One thing I would hope is that you would check the alignment on your original spring. Even though your original spring is rusty and it may not look good and it's old, it gives us a starting point, as the whole thing's about your alignment. And take your camber gauge and check the alignment on your original spring, get it nice and worked in. In other words, you have to take it either off your alignment rack or whatever setup you're using to align it. Take it out, bounce it around, get a good set, come back in and double check it. Remember, we don't want to be any more than 0.5 positive on the alignment on this spring, or you're not going to have any tires. You're going to put 5,000 miles, and that's all you're going to get out of your tires. So I have all the specifications on the spring that were in there. The loaded height, which is your important dimension, we'll go talk about that when we're back at the truck. And keep them coming. We get a lot of tech mails on these replacement springs not aligning. So so we're going to go ahead and try to get some more information, and we'll see you out at the truck. is a little tiny bit different than some of the other ones, meaning that we don't need the cup bolted down. Just kind of sits there. It's surely not going to go anywhere. And some of the later model ones will have a clip up here to hold the top of the spring. I don't know how the hell that clip's going to keep the spring in, but Ford did it, and that's the name of that tube. Look how much shorter the spring is. Oh my God. Okay. Let's jack it up slowly. Okay, hang on. Up. 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 Okay, stop. Check that spring seat, because we want to make sure it's the same as the other side and it's not hung up. This is always the problem with this thing, than buying aftermarket springs. And what they do is they buy the aftermarket springs before they check stuff. So they just set up themselves another problem and another installation. You can see this installation couldn't be simpler, but it's still another thing to do. And these springs, you don't know if they're going to be right or not. You don't know what the issues are going to be, and someday you're going to want to get this thing aligned. And of course, the longer the spring, the more positive it is. The shorter the spring, the more negative. Let's go and finish it up. And that's even worse on this side. It's screwed. But that's what I thought it would be. Your spring diameter is bigger, which is going to give you a little harsher ride. And your loaded height is too tall. So what we want to do is bring it up, and we know our loaded height is supposed to be 12 inches for alignment. And we're above 12 inches. Naturally, without even measuring it. Now, I know we're above that. And your sweet spot is 12 inches. This is 1.5 degrees positive. Not good. These tires will be gone. On a few trips to the bar, you won't get pulled over for drunk driving. You get pulled over for bad tires. So just keep on working on it. So this is 1/2 a coil here. I think we should do a little bit less. If we can get 0.4 or 0.5, I think we're going to be better off because of the...
Yeah, we'll
so I think that's 1/2, and this is less, and maybe 1/3. Get them while they're hot.
I think it needs to be a little bit more.
The alignment's the same on both sides. We can get another 1/4 degree out of it. But we're doing pretty good, and I think. Okay, as you've seen, we went ahead and got our Moog springs installed. And after cutting them and fooling around with them, as you could see in the video, that now we're less than 1/2 degree positive, but we are positive. We aren't right on zero. When we get a couple of people inside, it's going to be right on zero. So let's go ahead and we'll take the important dimension here, and let's go up with the lift, and let's get a spring measurement. Okay, so now we know that these springs align. So there's a certain height they can be. Of course, there's a certain rate we want too. Okay, so we have our springs installed. You know, this is the progressive rate. Liked it a little bit better. Not that big a deal, but let's take a measurement of this spring, and it looks like we're at 12.5 or 12.5 inches. Now we can pull this spring out, take it to the load checker, which we have. Nobody else has them, but we can check the how many pounds this takes to push this spring down, and we're going to figure to get it down to maybe 12.25 inches. It's going to take about 1,500 pounds. And then we can make our own spring that doesn't need to be cut. So let's go ahead and pull this one out, and then we can go to our spring winder and give him the information and have our own springs done. So here we go. So let's go ahead and pull this spring, and we'll load check it, and get those dimensions off, and we'll see what we can do to get a spring out of here without having to cut it. You'll probably have to cut it, so you know, we'll see. Okay, don't let me catch you without a jack stand. As you saw in the last video, the Ford's extremely easy to change the springs. So really the only thing holding this thing is the shock absorber, and we'll just pull that off. Okay, we'll just and our shock's out of the way, and our spring just fell out. Couldn't be easier. And so here's our spring we were talking about, and we've trimmed this so we can come up to our less than half degree. If we're after we got people in it, if it's 0.2 negative. And remember, we're taking 365 degrees. We're taking 1 degree of that, and then we're taking that 1 degree and we're splitting it into 10 pieces. And that's why we come out with 0.5 positive. That's 360 degrees, 1 degree, and then half of that. So it's a very, very small, but you need that in order to get your tires to wear okay. And of course you want it to drive good. So let's take it in and load check this spring, and that'll tell us everything we need to know about it. Okay, so we want to know, how do we know? And so we have a spring testing machine. We're going to take and put well over 1,000 pounds on these springs Sometimes we put 2,000 pounds on these springs or more. And of course, we want to set it to 0. On this Ford spring, in order to bring it down to the height we want, we know already we're gonna have to put about 1,400 pounds on it. So let's go ahead and this is where you probably could speed it up. Okay, so we got 1,000 pounds of pressure on this spring. We're not done yet. This is how we know that this spring's going to fit on that Ford, because we know that Ford is about 1,400 pounds per spring, because we've cut springs, we've measured those springs. Now we know. Now we can have the spring made, and so we're going to take it up another 400 pounds. So we're at 1,400 pounds. So all we have to do is know the height of the spring now. And we take it over in the light and simply measure it. And it's 1,400 pounds at 11.5, which is exactly the same print on the truck. So if you want to find out, well, I'm going to add 200 pounds for an air conditioner, which, you know, air conditioners don't weigh 200 pounds. But let's say you wanted to put a big heavy bumper on the front or something like that, we'd have to take this thing up to 600 pounds or 1,600 pounds. So we put a different engine in it, and that engine's heavier. And we go ahead and measure this thing. Now we're at 9, oops, excuse me. Now we just lost 3/4 of an inch in height on the spring by adding another 200 pounds. So what this means is you're going to be negative on your alignment. You're going to have to find a way to get this spring to be heavier, and the spring has to be at 11.5 at 1,600 pounds, 11.5 at 1,400 pounds, 11.5 at 1,200 pounds, always 11.5. And if 12 inches is sweet spot, whatever the blueprint calls for 11.5, that's where the manufacturer, the spring winders, taking their dimension at 1,600 pounds on our load cell, measures force, it measures pressure. The computer takes that pressure and converts it into pounds. So this amount of pressure, it converted through the computer to 1,600 pounds. 1,600 pounds on this spring, you put a different engine in it, just 200 pounds heavier. We're 3/4 of an inch lower than we're supposed to be. That gives you a negative camber problem. Are we going to put a shim on the top of the spring to bring it up to 11.5? Maybe. Are we going to make a stouter spring that'll hold more weight? But we know we changed that weight on there by putting a different engine in it, bumper, whatever you want to do, and only 200 pounds makes that big a difference, and now you're negative. Now you're scratching your head. Now what am I going to do? I got to get back to 11.5 inches, and that means a heavier spring. And if you do it like the Moog springs that we've checked, we've cut them. That's where we got the data to make this spring, is from cutting other springs, so we have that 11.5 dimension. And as you can see, at 1,600 pounds, we're all the way at 10 3/4, which will give you a negative camber problem. So you need to have a heavier spring to keep it at 11.5 at 1,600 pounds. Our truck only takes 1,400 pounds. And if you can imagine, the amount of pressure on that spring right now is scary. So we're going to go ahead and let off. Some pressure. So now you understand the secret of adding your big block and adding your 460 onto a truck that was made for using a smaller engine, a lighter engine, and what 200 pounds, it's just 200 pounds makes a 3/4 of an inch difference on this spring. So hopefully that gives you a good explanation on how all this stuff happens with springs. So now from the magic of spring manufacturing, we have our spring back from the manufacturer. We inputted all the numbers from our prototype spring, and with the Moog spring, and we came out with a spring that hopefully will actually fit. And maybe. Help me hold that spring up. Let's get a little. Okay, let's see if we can get it in place now. Yeah, dang it. Not much, didn't take much. I gotta be able to move it. Okay, here we are. Things are going well. If you have a later model, you may have a nut on your cup. On the 65, it doesn't have it. You may have another nut right there. We're not using them, we're just using the standard cup. And this springs in, and we'll bring it up. Watch the jack stand. Yes.
Oh, it's stuck. All right.
Huh?
Gotta get it right in that hole. Okay, there it goes. There it goes.
Okay, folks, that's how easy it is to change a spring in an F100. So you can see that you can fool around and not spend so much time. Drop that Okay, we don't want too much bulging on our bushing, so that's fine. So we're done as far as fitting the spring goes, and we'll put the thing on the tire on, and we'll unfortunately we have to pull it off the lift to set the spring, to get the spring nice and happy and compressed, and then put it back on, and then we'll check it for camber, and then this spring came straight out of the factory, hopefully without any So what did that take? That took, and we've done this a lot, we put springs in and out on this truck because we think it's a pretty standard truck, has a small block V8 in it. This particular one has fuel injection, but it's all aluminum. So we think even with a 352 in it, a lot of guys, a lot of the later model trucks come with a 302, which this has. That is going to be, is going to, you know, hopefully fit your truck. And what we got out of all this stuff and fitting these springs is almost every spring is tall, which is good because then you can trim it if it's tall. If it's short, you're not going to be able to trim it. And but it took us a half an hour to change the spring, to reinstall the shock, put the wheel on, and we're going to take it off, and then we're going to bounce it around a little bit, bring it back up, and see where we are in camber on the thing, and having the equipment to do it. And your truck, if it has a big block in it, you got to completely start over. The rate is wrong with this spring. Is for a 302 half-ton truck, a 6-cylinder. Again, it may be tall again, and you may have to trim it again. Not that much, because the modern 302s and the old style 6-cylinders, weight-wise, and it's the whole thing with weight, pushing down on this spring, getting it to a certain height that it's either going to be 0, positive, or negative, and you need a camber gauge to check it. Just go on eBay and buy yourself a camber gauge. It's well worth the money. So let's get this thing off of here. Well, that's expected. It's 1 degree positive, and that's to be expected because we haven't taken it off the lift yet. Okay, here we are back from our break-in ride to set these springs down so so we can measure them accurately. And we're measuring off the hub. Let's see where we are. We're at about 1/10 positive, maybe 2/10. 1 to 2/10 positive. That's perfect. We didn't have to touch the spring, remember. We had these springs made. We're going to be able to make them available to you. But if you buy another brand or whatever it is, you know how to do it now. But you know how to trim the spring. You know how to bring this thing in to 0.5 positive maximum. And when you get passengers inside it, it's going to be right close to zero. You're not going to wear your tires. You can spend $100 on a gauge like this off of eBay. There's different vendors. This is a $10 or $15 gauge. Of course, you want to measure off the hub too. It's magnetic. I prefer a little higher because we do them all the time. It depends how much you want to spend, but to get your camber in, and now you can get your toe accurate, and you can get a good little alignment on your truck, and it's all getting that spring no matter what it is. If you have a big block, remember your spring's going to be a lot more stout, but it doesn't change the dimension of your in between the beam and your upper spring seat. It still doesn't change that 12-inch dimension we talked about. So you're going to have to trim, do whatever it is to get that bigger spring because you got a bigger engine, you're holding more weight, but you still got to hit that 12-inch dimension. So we take a quick measurement, and we didn't have to do anything. We're right on the money, just barely above zero. When we put people in it, it's going to be zero or maybe a little bit negative. Your tires are going to wear fine. And we've driven this around. It drives good. It's very predictable for F100. It drives great. And so proceed on, and that's all there is to it.